Hi, everyone. Welcome to our DBT Path Emotion Regulation mini class. I'm here with Debbie. I'm Catherine Holt, a co teacher here at DBT Path, and we are giving a sneak peek into our new emotion regulation module to let you know what you might learn in this upcoming class.
And hi, I'm Debbie. I'm the co-teacher at DBT Path as well. And we're really excited to let you know what emotion regulation is about, what you can expect to learn during this module, and how it can benefit your life. So class starts on Monday. So why don't we just jump right into our presentation and get started? Okay, so today we'll be talking about the benefits, as I said, of our emotion regulation module that's coming up in just a few days. And just as a reminder, DBT Path offers psychoeducational DBT courses online, and our courses are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diagnosis or condition. So with that, let's get started. So we're going to start out by talking about one of the goals of emotion regulation. And I'm going to speak about this a little bit, and I'm going to throw it to Catherine to offer her thoughts and insights on this as well. But one of the things we want to focus on in this module is increasing positive emotions and decreasing negative emotions that become dysregulated. And I want to start by saying we're not talking about toxic positivity here, where we're like, oh, we don't want to feel any of the difficult emotions, or that any emotion is actually inherently bad or something that we don't want to have in our human experience. But what we do mean about this is that often if we're struggling with emotional dysregulation, there's something going on in our lives. There's some imbalance somewhere in our self-care, or it could be one of many things that we may get into tonight, or we'll definitely get into in the module itself. But it may be that we are needing to look at our self-care so that we're doing activities and looking at our self-talk and perhaps rewriting some scripts that we have in our minds so that we are increasing our experience of positive emotions, so that we're having them more often to help with our mental well-being. And as far as this decreasing negative emotions that become dysregulating, it's not that we don't want to feel sadness, that we don't want to feel anger, that we're never going to feel anxiety, or that we want to just cut these emotions off when they do come up. But the thing is that it says on here when they become dysregulating. So if I get upset about something and I'm crying and I want to feel that sadness, that might be very healthy and cathartic. But if I'm crying for hours and I can't get to sleep because of it, these skills can come in to help. Or if I'm in a workplace and I need to be professional around my colleagues or my boss, or I have a meeting that's coming up, or if I'm at school, some environment where it's not appropriate to fully feel and express those emotions in that moment, I may need to use some of these skills to cope and manage that until I'm at a time and place where I can work with my emotions in an appropriate way. So that's what we mean by increase positive emotions and decrease negative emotions that become dysregulating. And that is such a huge part of emotion regulation. What are your thoughts on that, Catherine?
Well, something that a lot of people who are emotionally sensitive or have BPD or borderline personality disorder traits feel is that they're out of control of their emotions. And the idea in this skills set is to learn that we're not fully out of control, and particularly around learning how to create positive emotions. And that's really transformative for people to learn that emotions aren't always running the show. We can actually create experiences for ourselves to feel differently. So it's not invalidating what we do feel, but it's helping us learn to control and create different feelings. And that's a big part of emotion regulation is to learn that we do have some control around creating positive experiences and decreasing negative ones. So that's that's just one more piece I would add, that that's one of the biggest gifts that people learn from DBT is that there is some self-control around emotions that doesn't minimize the importance of what they feel.
Beautifully put. And you actually just reminded me during one of the weeks of emotion regulation, we talk about positive triggers, which you never really hear people talking about, is usually like the negative
Yeah,
triggers that, but we actually can trigger ourselves into feeling positive emotions and feeling well. So
right. Right. And that's
Wonderful.
one of the tenets of DBT is to build a life worth living. And it's hard to build a life worth living if we're always in crisis or always in distress. And this emotion regulation is really learning to create a life in our daily actions, our day-to-day habits that help us feel like life is worth living. We want to wake up in the morning. We have something to look forward to because we're not always in distress.
Yes. There's a bigger picture. It's like the
Yeah,
small picture of day to day and then the bigger picture of our lives.
right. So how else can our emotion regulation course benefit you? Well, another huge component of this skill set is learning how to identify, understand, and express what you're feeling. One of the primary skills to control our emotions, interestingly, is to know what we're feeling. It's the ability to name. And research shows that if we can name what we feel, we have the words, that calms us. We might not, it doesn't go away, but it helps contain what we're experiencing. So, identifying what we're feeling is a huge part of this module. And then understanding why we're feeling that way and then what to do about it is part of how we learn to control what we're feeling without feeling out of control. We know what we're feeling, we can name it, we can sense why we might feel that way, and then we have some decisions rather than just acting on impulse or feeling like we have to react to every emotion. We have some control around what to do next. Debbie, what would you like to add to that?
I feel like that's so empowering, that whole process. And we use a lot of tools in this module to accomplish the tasks that you just described. And we use Dr. Marsha Linehan's DBT workbook, the handouts and worksheets. And one of those handouts is about identifying the emotion you're feeling in the moment. And you might wonder, well, how do you even do that? For some people, it might feel like it's a scramble of emotions. I feel 500 emotions at once. I feel, or I can't even pinpoint what I'm feeling. So there's a section in the workbook that we work on together in the course where we look at all of the primary emotions, the most common emotions that people feel: happiness, sadness, jealousy, anger, fear. And we look at it from the perspective of, okay, what kind of thoughts am I having? So we start to evaluate our inner experience. What kind of thoughts am I having? What am I noticing in my body? Because there are actual biological, physiological changes that take place in our human bodies depending on which emotion we're feeling. So even if we feel cloudy mentally or intellectually about what we're feeling, we can look to the body and say, what am I feeling here? And go to the handouts and go to the lesson and the homework that we'll do around this to say, okay, well, these are some telltale signs. I might actually be sad, or I might actually be afraid underneath anger, or, it'll help us to identify what we're feeling perhaps on the surface and even below the surface. And so we'll look at tools like that, as well as we'll have homework assignments where during the week, when you notice that you feel overwhelmed, whether you can identify the emotion or not, you'll work through this worksheet and answer various questions, do a real check in with yourself, and then get feedback from a team member so you can better understand your experience and also use the experience as cues or red flags the next time that you start to have this particular emotion coming on, so that you understand what's happening and you know how to cope more effectively in the moment. So, for example, if the emotion was anger because of an issue that happened with your spouse, and it's something that's recurring in the relationship, next time you will be able to anticipate, that this emotion may come up, and you can think about in advance how you want to cope effectively in that situation, so you don't perhaps repeat the same mistake or ineffective way of coping that you may have been using, I don't know, up until now. So it gives you a lot of insight and allows you to understand the emotion that's coming up, why it's coming up, how to cope with that emotion effectively, so that we're keeping in mind our short and long term goals, for example, in our relationship.
And one of the reasons why identifying and understanding what we're feeling is such an important skill in recovering from BPD traits or if we're emotionally sensitive is that we most likely experience what we call an invalidating environment if we feel like we struggle with internal emotional chaos. And that can come in a lot of different ways. But what we mean by that in DBT is that an invalidating environment did not validate or help us develop the language to identify what we're feeling. So, a basic example is that if you imagine a child who is having a tantrum, they're having a big emotion, we might not know what it is, and the caregiver says, "You're not upset. Get over it. You're not upset." Then over time, that repeated information, that repeated message in small or large ways can create a lot of internal dysregulation because clearly there's an emotion happening, but the child is being told that they shouldn't be feeling what they're feeling. So rather than getting the language of, oh, I feel angry or I'm sad or I wanted that and I didn't get it, that's disappointing, then often that child is left without adequate language and an understanding of what to do with what they're feeling. So if you span that out into adulthood, that can create a lot of internal emotional chaos. And that's often the case with people who have intense emotional experiences as adults, from BPD traits to emotional sensitivity. So, emotion regulation, the skills in this module are really based in that perspective that the skills are the ones we did not receive when we were younger, and so we're learning them now.
That's such an important point, Catherine. And I know that sometimes we also bring up the fact that sometimes people say, no, my family upbringing was wonderful. My parents were supportive. I feel like they understood my sensitivity, but I had a hard time at school because I was ostracized or I was bullied. I didn't fit in. So I felt really invalidated in that environment. I didn't have the words for it back then, but I can see that that's what was happening. Or in society, with different prejudices and, oppression in different for different people in different groups. So it can be from a variety of sources why we would be in this position.
Right, right, exactly.
Okay. So next up, this is going to be experiential for just a moment. One of the ways that this emotion regulation course can benefit you, which I feel is huge, is that it can increase what is called your window of tolerance. So we look at this imagery over here and we see that the window is open about this much. Let's say that's maybe even less than 25%. So I want you to think right now, just check in with yourself, check in with your body, and ask yourself on a scale of 0 to 100%, where is your stress level at right now in your life? Don't censor yourself, just feel into it. Okay. So I would guess that today most people are at least at a 50%, Catherine. I don't know what what
Yeah,
your thoughts are.
yeah,
So, and if we're emotionally dysregulated, if we have severe anxiety, if we have CPTSD, if we have borderline personality disorder, if we're emotionally sensitive, that number, especially with the stress of all of the things that are happening in the world today, and then add on our own personal concerns, that number is likely higher. So let's say you're working with a high number. You're saying, okay, my stress level on a scale of 0 to 100% is 90. So here's your window of tolerance when you have 100% of space, right? If you're 90%, if you're stressed out at 90% level, that means you have about this much space in your window of tolerance. So what does that mean? So what it typically means, if you feel that your stress level is at a 90% out of 100, is that you only have about 10% capacity to work with, just this little bit of space, for everyday annoyances, everyday stresses, little things that happen could cause you to feel that you're dysregulated, that it's just pushed you over the edge. Little things that other times in your life, little things that would have felt like water off a duck's back in the past or in other times in your life just feel completely overwhelming and even emotionally derailing. And that's because we don't have a lot of space or capacity in our nervous systems to cope effectively with everyday stresses, let alone the bigger major problems that are going on in our lives and are going on in the world without that capacity. So it says here on the slide, in emotion regulation, we learn to increase your ability to handle life stress without completely getting overwhelmed. And the way that we do that is we use tools and techniques to increase our window of tolerance so that perhaps you're at 90% when you start the class, but you start to use these tools and techniques. And in a couple of weeks, you go down to maybe 85 or 80%, which may not sound like much, but in actuality, that has provided more space for you to be able to handle what life throws at you without having as intense of a reaction as if you were at a 90%. This alone can make such a world of difference. I know you like talking about the window of tolerance, Catherine.
Yes, and I love how you gave that example, of people's stress and then how much is left. And the window of tolerance theory comes from trauma research, and it really forms the foundation of if we can expand our window of tolerance, it means that we have more room to feel without losing control. And often that is a challenge for people who feel emotionally sensitive, that they feel a lot, but if they feel too much, then they cross that threshold and then it's out of control. And so having tools and skills to open that window of tolerance, which really means feeling more resourced when we're not in a crisis. It's like we have more cushion and more kind of buffer, that helps us in moments when we need the buffer. When even something, like you said, kind of a daily occurrence happens, that we don't lose our cool, but we can handle daily occurrences without it becoming a crisis. And that's really the idea, is that we want to be able to move through life with daily annoyances being daily annoyances and not crises.
Absolutely. Another thing that we focus on in the emotion regulation module is, as it says up here, tapping into your gifts as an emotionally sensitive person for a more fulfilling life. So we're not saying that you need to get rid of your sensitivity, that you shouldn't feel deeply, that you shouldn't love at the depth that you do or care about the causes and people that you do. But if it's becoming dysregulating, we're going to learn how to protect ourselves so that we can feel, so that we can authentically and genuinely have the feelings we have for other people, for animals, for the world, whatever it might be for you, without allowing that to dysregulate us. So we can enjoy those parts of ourselves while not allowing them to become dysregulating. But also, we want to focus on what retaining that emotional sensitivity in a healthy and balanced way can allow us to do with our gifts in terms of being of service to the world, creating things that we want to create, helping others. So this is a focus as well of the module.
Learning that emotional sensitivity has a gift is really empowering for people who come to DBT Path, because often people who come to find DBT have been told that their emotions are a problem, that they have caused problems for themselves or for other people, for their relationships, for their work. And so, one of the important aspects of DBT Path is that we emphasize the gifts of emotional sensitivity and that peers are supporting you. Debbie, you want to mention you're in your own recovery journey, and understanding that people with emotional sensitivity have so much to offer. They're not just a problem, is one of the most validating and empowering parts of the program.
Yes, actually, I talk about this a little bit more in depth in the class as appropriate, but my story does include being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder in 2010, learning these skills, and within 3 years, no longer meeting the diagnostic criteria and starting this class, which will be in its 10th year as of 2023 of teaching online DBT skills. And so this is a very powerful example in my mind of tapping into my gifts as an emotionally sensitive person, channeling all of that into something that helps others. And I hope to be an inspiration and encouragement to you even if you don't want to go on to teach DBT skills, but whatever you're passionate about in your life so that you feel that you can focus that energy and that emotional sensitivity in that direction. The other great thing about this course is there is a community of people around the world who also have the same intention for working toward the same types of goals. So you will have camaraderie, you will have support, understanding through both the challenging and inspiring times of this journey.
How else can our emotion regulation course benefit you? Well, one of the main aspects of emotion regulation is adopting small daily adjustments that are effective, simple, and easy to follow. And that's what we'll be focusing on is how to make lifestyle changes that support you in feeling more in control, more at ease emotionally.
Yes, and this course provides the structure to do that with support and feedback. So you're not on your own with it. Another benefit of this module is that your tuition includes access to instruction from us as well on mindfulness skills, which are scientifically proven to help us go deeper with our emotion regulation. We practice mindfulness skills weekly, sometimes twice a week with the midweek materials that is usually presented by Catherine. And mindfulness skills help us to access our inner wisdom so we can become more in tune with what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're wanting, what we're needing. And this can so impact the depth of our emotion regulation practices.
What we want to leave you with today is encouragement to know that you can do this. We've seen so many people learn DBT skills and feel more empowered in their lives, and you don't have to do it alone.
Absolutely. And just being in the group energy of other people who also have this commitment and also understand the challenges that can come up can be so energizing and inspirational and motivating and get you excited about the changes that you can make in your life. So we hope you'll join us. Class is starting very soon. Please go to emotionallysensitive.com and join us today. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Debbie.
Bye for now.